Today we're going to go over how to load a Bolex. For pretty much all Bolex 16mm cameras that were made without an electric motor, this process is always the same. This right here is a Bolex Rex 5 camera. In order to get enough power to the camera, we actually use this hand crank, and that stores all of the power of the camera in a spring. So it kind of works like the gears of a clock. I just have to crank it. Once you get to the 21st rotation, it should seize up, and then you can take the arm crank for the camera, and there's a slot right at the bottom. You'll just pop it in place. Now, while we're running the camera, this is a seal that will seal off the eyepiece, so that if you don't have something blocking the eyepiece, you might lose light through the eyepiece. Part of the weird thing about Bolexes is that it has a mirror-based system, and that system cuts out a certain fraction of the light. In a future video, we're going to be discussing how to use the light meter in order to read specifically for the Bolex camera. I have one of the last rolls of Kodak 7285 Ektachrome 100D color reversal film stock. This is a really prized film stock. Pretty old now. A 16mm film roll, contrary to popular belief, does not need to be loaded in the light. It actually comes with what's called a daylight spool. This blocks out all of the light, and then this extra orange strip along the side makes sure that there's no extra light leaking to the first part of this film, but almost always we lose the first part of the film. So you don't have to throw out the first 5 or 10 feet. If we load this correctly, we'll only lose at most like a second of footage. And that kind of looks nice anyway. There is a strip here, and typically what I'll do is take this because it has 7285 on it, so it kind of reminds me about what the film stock is that I loaded. And I'll put this, for the time being, on the door of the Bolex. So that lets me remember 7285. I can then go back and purposefully set my light meter to the proper ISO. In order to take the door off of Bolex, what we do is turn this knob here, and you should feel the door lift up just a little bit. Inside of a Bolex, you'll find that there's a take-up reel, very similar to the reel that I've got over there. In order to pop this take-out reel out, which we'll do to begin with, what we're going to do is use one of these functions here. This knob will pop out this metal, and then we can move that to the side. This is the plate, a pressure plate that pulls the film through. And in order to load, we actually want this to be depressed, so we want to feel that click in place. And then in addition, we have these two what are called roll formers. Those roll formers need to be put in place because the Bolex has this nice kind of handy automatic loading system. And so to do that, we just go ahead and pinch those two rollers. Now it's time to get some film. So when we use the film, at first what we want to do is pull out long enough of a strip, not too long. And what I'll do is go to the bottom of the Bolex where there's actually this kind of like handy cutter. This film cutter will allow for us to kind of feed the Bolex through the automated system, and we want to like make sure that the little sprocket that appears here on the Bolex is still intact, but we want to cut just before we get to that sprocket. So putting it in and then cutting it. And then of course, always make sure that you keep this piece of film, that little strip, out of the camera because it can break the camera. I'm going to pop this right into place here and roll this back and slide it in. Now, because I already had a roll, or rather I stored the power right with the hand crank, now I can actually click the roll button and it'll automatically pull through. Now that that's pulled through, I just want to get a little bit more, and that's so that I can take this, and you'll notice that there's a little slot in each one of these daylight reels, so that's perfect for feeding the film through. And because the film has that little cut on it, it actually allows us to load this up. And this is the tricky part. We just want to make sure that this lines up here. Once we got that lined up, we also want to make sure that the film is in front of this little piece of metal. Click it in place, load it, and you want to basically tug on it until you feel it is a little bit firm, that you feel something is pulling back. And once you've done that, then we can take off the loop rollers, because we don't need those loop formers anymore. There's a button right here in the middle of the camera. What we're going to do is press that. It'll pop that open, and then we want to roll just a little bit more. Perfect. Having done that, we can now put the door back on the camera. Now, this is an old roll of film, so it's going to be hopefully colorful, but it could actually come out to be a little bit red. And one thing that we'll discuss when we talk about how to light for the Bolex, or how to expose the aperture of the lens. We'll talk about the loss of light that happens in a Bolex, but we'll also talk about what to do with expired film stock and how can we get the best results out of it. Just in case, I like to roll it just a little bit more, and perfect. So that's how you load a Bolex camera.